Okay. I think I'm going to have to live with the transcript. Okay. Someone else has reached out to me within the industry. A guy called Anthony Brophy. He's doing something on a data dictionary, which I think kind of like lines in with what we were talking about as we came to a conclusion at the end of last year. Shall I just share what they sent me?
Sure. This is CoBuilder, Martin, and they're very keen on.
This is, can you see it? Define?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he wants me to get involved in this, but I said, no, hang on. I'm doing something similar, but we should try and align our thinking or our working. I said I'd ask this group whether or not we should. Has anybody come across this yet?
Yes, I'm well aware of it.
Okay.
And they're very commercial,
Right.
And they are very non-collaborative.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
So if it's free, and if the data templates that they produce are open and free, then I think that we can work with it. But they're trying to own and control the whole process, to be honest, Martin.
So it's a free and available to all users. Then we'll
at no
be,
cost.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. That's total. Yeah.
Yeah, we tread quite a fine line, don't we? Because we've got obviously virtually everybody's part of a commercial organisation, and I think we've all done very well in not abusing that, if that's to be perfectly blunt. And I think we have to be have a level of care that we continue with that ethos throughout. Really, don't you?
With the lexicon initiative that we did with the BRE and the CPA, CoBuilder were in about 5 years ago. They asked if they could partner with us on it, and we were obviously receptive to that, because if they've got something to contribute, they could do. But they were very we provided them with information, but they didn't provide us with any. And they then went and set up rival organizations in Europe, branded lexicon, which the CPA was quite cheesed off about. So they've got a bit of a history, to be honest with you, Martin, of doing things that are not collaborative,
ethical.
let's say. Yeah, well, yeah, I've got to be careful here as to how far I go with that. But all I'm saying is that our ethos has always been to try and make this information as open and available as possible, so that, because the fact is that there's too many individual organizations that are creating their own silos. And in fact, CoBuilder have done a deal recently with BSI, where they are commercializing BSI's digital content. So the standards, which sounds a good idea, but there's already quite a lot of objections to the fact that everything now that you get from BSI is behind a paywall. Yeah.
And does that include their, because they had their BSI identifier, didn't they? That was their answer to product data and information. Is that a commercial operation as well, George? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. And it's not doing what BSI identify is doing is fine, but what it's not actually holding any data. It's just providing a register.
It's interesting. Is there a, you know, if you were to have the conversation with Judith Hackett, should be put out that people are seeking to take advantage of this need that's developing in terms of readily available data to all. Is there a governing body that should be controlling this sort of thing, or?
Well, there's
CPA, perhaps? I don't know.
The CPA set up something called the Construction Product Index, I think it was called, but that now seems to have lost its way. The chief executive left midway through the year. CCPI. Do you know anything about that, Ian?
Yeah, so it's somewhat the Code for Construction Products Information. It isn't. I think this is one of the issues. There's so many things operating in and around this space that the CCPI's function is to validate information. So the point of CCPI is it's effectively a pledge to expose your marketing information to an artificial intelligence system that basically tells us how honest it is. So it's more about, the CCPI is more about, I think there's 11 core requirements within the pledge, and you pledge as a manufacturer to declare your information against those 11 criterias. And then there's supposed to be this magic AI in the background that checks your test evidence against those marketing claims to check that it's valid and real. There's an awful lot. It's like with so many things, an awful lot gets chucked in that basket of artificial intelligence will solve it for us, without anyone actually really understanding what artificial intelligence is or does, or how it particularly. But we've been supportive of, I mean, in terms of where we sit with the CCPI, we've been supportive of the initiative, but very cognizant of the complexity of actually validating test evidence. We do it in certain areas like acoustics, and it's a lot more complex than people think it is to validate that this acoustic claim is the same as what we tested over there. And I guess that's the problem it's trying to solve. So our ambition is always that we do an acoustic verification scheme. We'd like to roll that into the CCPI eventually. It's nowhere near ready for it. And I think all these things are kind of touched upon. It's more so I sent you a bit of a paper, Martin, just to get your thoughts on it, because there's lots of stuff coming together from lots of different directions here.
You did. Do you want me to share it, Ian?
Yeah, I'm more than happy for me. It's more. It's in the basis of it's an initial set of musings around what's actually going on out there.
Yeah.
And so map who. Yeah. So
I was reading through it when this started, so I've got it.
That standard of language. It's the language through it that sort of. A lot of this is based on the stuff from the IET. So the IET did a really good piece of research. You've probably seen that one around the. Yeah,
that's the 7.
Yeah, that's sort of their 7 steps. So that's this kind of builds upon that. And then if you scroll right through it, Martin, because a lot of this is just background. Some of it is just really notes that I've put in one place for me, really, because that looks at the types of data. What's a product? What's a system? What's a component?
Yeah, like it.
That we all struggle with, and then mapping that back to show we're not just thinking, this is about material. That's all the stuff in material passports, which is very similar to the stuff we're talking about, product, system, component, etc.
Just as a bit of feedback, it was around about data models that you lost me, Ian. I know most of your readers will be more intelligent than I, but I started losing it here.
Yeah, this is it. I think this is it. It gets so much more complex, and then you start getting into what structured data, usually how should data be organized. It's just a myriad. When you start getting into it, it's just a myriad of different standards depending on who you're talking to. So you've got your sustainability people talking about material passports. You've got your people talking about digital twins. You've got people talking about BIM templates. You've got people saying that BIM templates aren't a thing anymore, and they're not referencing the standards. And it's just becoming so complex. I tried to put everything in one place.
Yeah.
And then sort of try to draw a logic out of it. So some of it is a bit of a dump at the moment, Martin. If you scroll right to the end, this is the bit that I'm trying to sort of work through, which is if you map it all through, effectively what we need is product data sheets which tell you everything you need to know about the product, and into material passports which tell you everything about the where the product's being used, how it's maintained, and then that moves it into that sort of sets it up for a digital twin model, which means that you've got that real live as built. So you've got a live version of the building living in the digital world, and that's how do we get from here to there? And I think we're going back to product. We're sort of getting ahead of what Lexicon's effectively setting the framework. So this is how we create product data templates. We're going a little bit back to that now, and then starting to say, look, and this is a very crude image at the moment, but who needs what data, and then where does that live within that mix of other stuff that's up there? What's the difference between IFC, what the digital object identifiers, which is what BSI identified is based on, and well, it is a beggar's muddle to me. I mean, I must have read over Christmas about 30 different reports, all coming from different angles about data and trying to make sense of it. It's
good. I found out that one's been dropped, that PAS.
It's already out, Dave.
Good stuff.
I'll
stick it on the chat for people to have a read. Worth reading, guys. Working my way through it now.
I think the thing, Ian, that I've discovered in being quite closely involved in all this, but nowhere near as bright as some of the academics that are involved in it, it is that there's a lot of, is it obfuscation, where people actually make things really quite complex because they keep referring to standards, and this is in particular one of the things that CoBuilder does. When you ask them specific information, they'll say, well, yeah, we're complying with all the EN standards and the SEN standards, and they'll quote the committee that was actually defining all of this, and you immediately get into the weeds of how do you work out what that parameter actually is, whereas what I've been trying to do and what we've been trying to do, even with the templator and lexicon, is make it far more explicit. So because otherwise you don't get anything that's useful.
George, it's a bit like the old thing on site when people go, on BIW.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, is it? Oh, it's in BS 8439 part 72, and you go, thanks, that's useful. You do, I see all the. It's interesting because it's a bit like all the key criteria that you need. I think probably the stuff that we've done, Jill, we're probably the only few people out there that have actually bothered to break it down into what's actually required, rather than go, oh, it's just on that classification, not the rest of it.
That's absolutely right. And so the proposition that I think we I made, and I think we've sort of agreed on in principle. So I've also discussed it with the thing about just having data sheets, just having a product data sheet that's properly referenced with a classification wrapper that's free. Yeah, so therefore we've got something there that's at least a baseline that everybody can work to. The content of that data sheet, making it all machine readable and well structured, is something that I'm passionately keen to do, and that's what we're trying to do with Lexicon and the other initiatives. But the fundamental thing, first of all, the first position, I think, is just getting a data sheet. So if we've actually got a data sheet that the manufacturer is keeping up to date, and therefore we actually know what the product was that was installed, and then possibly what is its replacement, what's its proposed replacement in 5 years' time. And I think if we've got that everybody's using the same data set, and I've emphasized again, it needs to be free, then that's something that we've got at least a baseline to work from. Does that make sense, Ian?
Yeah, it does. So I'm I still think, coming back to though, it might be easier just to focus it on fire for now. And let
Oh
everything.
no, I agree.
If you just have standard data declarations around fire, you're probably
Yes.
going to get. There's probably a bit we can go at, which is going to help us get through these gateways. That's going to be a lot easier to manage than sort of this full wider gamut of properties that we need to declare. That's my view. Is I think if we just did this for fire, and we just standard around fire for now, everything else can catch up.
Yes, and the other bit of new, I think I mentioned, we've been discussing with Lloyd's, them actually offering a service to manufacturers who want their product information to be validated. So that's something that people can choose to have or not, but just having the product data as a data sheet, I think will help. And I've also been discussing this with GS1, Ian. GS1, Martin, are the people that do the barcodes internationally. Yeah. So they're keen to have products barcoded, and the manufacturers pay them, but my understanding is it's a very, very low fee, and they manage the barcoding. That's not necessary for what we've been talking about, but it's something that can sort of help join this together. And the GS1 codes and that would also support what BSI is trying to do.
Okay.
I believe.
Did I can't just excuse me because I had a bit of a funny brain because obviously I was pumped for so many drugs before Christmas. There's a bit of a hazy patch, unfortunately. So do you know the last meeting we had? Did I show you the I can't remember if I showed them to you as well, just a bit of what we were doing on these passive slides. Did I show you these at all? I can't remember.
Can't remember myself.
I think you've shown me.
Yeah. If not, what I think, because you know, I'm just in my own head. I'm just a great believer that the whole thing's so. I know it's going to sound like I'm being a bit simplistic, but it's so simple. And I think you made the point there very well earlier, yourself, Martin, that everyone quotes all of these standards, but no one just goes, well, actually, for a door it's just this, and for a damper it's this, and for a smoke control it's that, and getting it onto one sheet. And I think I was talking before Christmas, remember, about doing a bit of work with you on template, and I think I've got a project I can do a bit of this with you at the moment. I'm going to get Lucy to get in touch with you as well. So I need to get something into a working example. But if I haven't shown you, I'll just show you these quick now, and I will send them out. I've got a meeting with the PFKG at the end of this month, and I want to go through it and get some agreement with them first before we make it something that's a bit easier and a bit more freely available. If you've got time, let me just show you this quickly, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Just bear with me. I mean, before Christmas, everything's just a blur. Can't remember half of it. One second, I'll just bring this up on the screen. Not until you've had a proper infection you realise how nasty they are. Let's go on now quickly. Hold on.
I'll take your word for it, Paul. I'm not going to try to find out.
No. Crazy. Let's just do this quickly. Hold on. So what I tried to do was, if I just go back up to the top, was do an example around fire dampers and protected corridors. That's all this. People quote all of this stuff, but forgetting all of that, I just went, look, let's forget that. Let's just break it down into a system approach. I'm doing that thing in relation to one of the wall types, this thing, because all these things have got to be considered, but I was just doing it on the basis of a damper first of all. If I go down, this was the charts I sent out previously, which tells you everything you need to do if you was a chartered consultant in relation to, say, building services or fire, how you can follow an architect. But these are the 5 key parts, whether it's the type of risk of the building, the operational type of the system. And I think I don't know if I've said this before, but a fire door's transient because you can go through it. When you open it, it's breached. When it shuts on its own, it's then compartmented. A damper either opens, so it either shuts or closes. You could call it. Things like smoke control is dynamic. It's extracting something. Do you know, different ways of looking at it. But then you've got classifications of those products. Then you've got wall types. Then you've got installation and maintenance types. So I tried to break it into these parts. But what I said previously is obviously, you know, a fire engineer can do, you know, the building safety type, not always the space risk, but generally they can, but not always. But the consultant should be able to do the operational or static type, and, you know, the classification, you can get it from a manufacturer. And, you know, same thing for the wall type, but not one party can do it all. So what I try to do is to say, let's look at a way to do it in, you know, to bring that into simple fashion where you can go, what does it actually look like? So if you looked at it, you know, from, you know, the safety and the building type, I'm looking at a you know, disabled refuge or a protected corridor. I sort of went, well, if you look at the building safety type, so it's a 1A or 1BC, all the different group categories you've got, whether, you know, the shape of the form of the building, the heights. Let's move you off of there quickly, Martin. And all the different space risks that you've got to sort of bring it out. I sort of went, well, that's the example to look at. If we're looking at one of these, it's, you know, it's less than, you know, 900 meters square. It's, say, it's bigger than 50 meters. It's a type 2B. It's a refuge. It's got smoke. It's got fire in that particular risk category. Just to make it easier to kind of follow. Then I went, well, if you look at the operational types of it, you know, whether it's static, transient, dynamic, I went, well, that's what I'm looking at. It's one of these, because the thing is about product information. It's also about whether it's the blade type, whether it's, you know, I've got the keys down, if it's parallel, opposed, single blade, fusible link. This all affects pressure drop, which is your approved document part L. You can't mess with that. It is what it is. If you've got to do, you know, 2 watts a litre of fan power delivered, you know, you can't be 2.2, you can't be 3, you can't be 2, you've got to be below 2 watts a litre. So this has an effect on what that thing is going to be doing in airflow terms. It can affect the product you end up with. So kind of try to break it out so you can look at, you know, obviously a fire risk, there's a smoke risk, any sort of, you know, rating from approved document B, because it's, you know, it's an S rating, you've got to have it activated by, you know, fire alarm, you can't ignore it. So you've got power and fire alarm interface there as well. So you've got an idea of what we're looking at. So I went down to about descriptive of it, and I said, well, if you look at the descriptive of it in a different way of looking at it, well, it's ES, which is your fire and your smoke. It's I've got an opposed blade type in there, because in reality, that's probably about 50% free area. That might give you 60, and that'll give you about 70% free area. But you can't use fusible link because it's ES. It's got to be method 4, which is your from an ADB, which is your fire alarm activated, you know, damper. Classification inside to out VE. I've kind of explained all these down here, what it is, you know, and the cycling up to C10,000. That's how many oscillations you can do them up to if you want to do it. So that's the kind of product I'd be looking for. Then I wanted to look at the wall interface as well to say, well, these are your 2 types of standard supporting construction you've got. These are all the blade types that exist for fire dampers. These are all of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's away from wall, but that falls under fire rated ducts, so you can just ignore it. Then I want to say, well, what type of wall construction am I looking at? What's compatible? Well, those are compatible with that. That's compatible with that. That's compatible with either generally. That can be done in either. That only works in that. That only works in that, and that works in either. I've kind of like, this is all the classification stuff you've got to have on data sheets. So when you're selecting it, then you've got your seal type. These are EN 520 boards, a mineral wall, sand and cement. So I've kind of put it all in there. But I said, like, check with it, like for the wall thickness, you've got to check with the manufacturer, the DOP, compare with the other wall system products, DOP, to ascertain the thickness of all the system components, the door, the ducts, the flues, whatever's going through that wall, to make sure you've got the right thickness of what you need. That makes sense? It's just an easy way of portraying it. And you go, well, I've gone for a flange, it's going to go in that. I need to check that, but I've got a mineral wall info. But then I've got to look at the next part, which is installation, access and maintenance. So I went, well, let's have a look at it. This is all the key classifications. Well, it's a flange, it's a post blade, it's in a vertical installation and a wall. It's that type of wall. I've got to check it with all the other components, and that's the seal type, EN 520 mineral wall. Then I've got installation. If it's in the wall here, I need to allow sufficient space either side, should I say. Do you know what? I did a nice little key here as well. I drew that myself. And you go over here, you go, well, the distance between that and that is a minimum this, or the distance required by the firewall for its tested requirements. So I've kind of even put the TR19 access doors, which you can kind of see what it looks like in practice. You know, breakaway joints, everything. and that's how you end up with a final classification for what you need for a damper. So it was a kind of trying to portray it a different way. So when you look at the key information for a data sheet, it's not just that number, it's all the other bits that you've got to consider. That part. Do you know what I mean? That part. That's like kind of trying to break it up.
Well, just in there, have you done anything on sort of tolerances? So if you get to extremes of tolerances, are we likely to get problems within any of those particular areas? Because that's another one we see. In fact, I had a call this morning about somebody, it was the tolerance of the building. They couldn't install it. By the time the tolerance was as far out as it was allowed to be,
well,
that's their stuff, because
that's
it was
concrete standards, isn't it? And that's plus or minus 25 mil from line and linear and 25 mil for deviation.
This was actually the brick. This was actually the brick tolerance on the outside, but the same rule applies.
Yeah. But I think, you know, the kind of the thing is with all of this is like trying to bring it together as a system. And I kind of did it to say, well, if you look at, you know, that, and this is what we presented the Build Expo in simplicity. What does it look like in practice? Well, that's just for what a damper looks like in practice. But you're right, Ian. There is building tolerance as well. You know, that it's as if there's so many things that you need to get on a data sheet, on a product data sheet, that, you know, classification doesn't take account of. You kind of need to like set, you know, and I think with the damper one, I will do it in a more simplistic form. You know, though I've got, and I think you've seen this before, I know I've got, even though I've got, you know, things like.
Can I just ask, Paul, that classification you ended up with there on that slide, was that what it will look like, or was that what it is currently?
That's what it will need to be for that particular instance.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that that's the classification, but this is the other things you need to know. You need to know that like this one causes absolute havoc. Because if you imagine, you know, is that consultants are still going to people like Mandic, Trox, you know, Actionair, and going, can I have a fire damper, please? And they're going, where you go, here's one of these, is that all right? And they go, oh, that'll do. I'll stick it in my spec. They've not gone through that process to get to actually what is it and how does it work with everything else.
Well, when you say it's classification, what is that classification?
Well, this is what you get on the DOP, Declaration of Performance. You'll get integrity, 120 minutes, vertically installed, inside to out, SC 10,000.
Got it. Okay.
What you don't get is that bit being checked, that bit being checked, all that being verified, and seeing whether that works.
Yeah.
Because it's all about that as well. And those diagrams kind of make it a bit easier to understand.
So the classification, so that's a complementary classification to a uniclass.
Yeah, see, in the thing, this is the bit I need to spend some time with you, George, and I do apologise for something out, is that I need to see all the different uniclass that exists, and actually whether it's what I said, you kind of need its own fire templater, so certain things can be linked back in.
Yeah, I mean, in essence, that's why the data dictionary approach, the templater approach, because templater is a data dictionary. It allows you to have multiple classifications against a thing. In this case, a damper. So you've got the classification. You've probably got 2 or 3 different classifications, even within uniclass. So you'd have a product classification, you'd probably have a system classification, and you might also have an entity classification. So that's because they're looking at things from that particular perspective. Whereas what you're doing here, you're looking at it in the actual context of where it's being installed, I think, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah.
And therefore that carries a different level of classification, which is more explicit to that particular circumstance.
Yeah, what Paul's been through there is a designer's classification, isn't it? You've done the design, you've gone through the design process, and you've picked a solution.
This is the regulation for, yes, it's appropriate for the circumstances.
Yeah.
All that's to do is it's just trying to make that case example.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
can see actually how you get to that point.
Yeah.
So I agree with Ian's point that if we can do this properly for a few products, like the fire critical products, then it's going to deliver immediate value for people, and also it will help people get their heads around it, because it is complicated, isn't it?
No, it really is. And I think, I can't remember if it was Mark who you said it before, right? Martin, you said it before, is that I don't think people really realise how complicated it actually is. And I'm not trying to make it more complex. I'm trying to dumb it down. Do you know, as best as I can, because I think I spoke to you about this previously, Ian, yourself. Is that fire doors are more interesting because if you looked at the same PowerPoint, and I'm going to do something possibly around it, is that you go, well, you got to consider the security. You got to consider, you know, the dock M side of it, how you get in and out, the push pull forces, and the rest of it. You know, it becomes ever so difficult just to go, I'm going to buy a door from Karma. Screw everything else. Security's getting procured by MVP 6 months later. That's their problem. Can't do it. So it's a stop. Do you know what I mean? It's a procurement stop.
The other thing that I think is interesting. I was talking with a housing association last week, and they were telling me that a very, very high percentage of the replacement doors that they're putting in at the moment, that a qualified contractor is putting in, are failing. These are a replacement for what? I think they're having to replace 3,500 fire doors. Now, fire doors, the cost of fire doors now has gone up from something like £800 a door set to anything as much as £5,000. Yeah, which, you know, starts to make it hugely significant. And I was working with on a project that we're doing with another big tier one. I won't say who. They did an audit of a scheme that they were carrying through, and 75% of the 75% of the doors that had just been installed, when they were inspected, they failed.
Dimensional tolerances, was it, George?
To be honest with you, I don't. They did show me the detail, but I didn't really understand it. But yes, I think the when they did the inspections of the doors, only 25% of them passed, and this is from an approved installer on new buildings. I don't know what's your experience on.
I'm not shocked. We looked at moving away from it. We looked at the percentage of flat roofs that leak within 12 months of being installed, and that was 50%.
Crikey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the impacts of leaking. Yeah. How about you, Mark? What's your experience been?
Well, I mean, what you were saying is interesting, but I suppose there's sort of a lack of detail, isn't there, as to what the reasons for the failure is. So it's a little bit difficult to comment. You know, is it design? Is it workmanship?
And I'll try and find a bit more, and I'm sure that they'll be willing to share, especially in this group. Yeah.
Or is it or is it poor design leading to poor workmanship, which is the other link between the two?
Yes.
You know, I just think, you know, the thing is, you know, this is where I kind of sort of something. So I turned my camera because it was playing up. Just turn it back on again. Sorry. The thing for me is that there's a mental thing in my own head. Someone said to me the other day, my mental cinema is quite all over the place at times. I thought it was quite funny. Is that we're in this kind of world where we we believe it's an architect, we believe it's a building services engineer, we may blame the client. The issue is the person for me that ends up with the contract is the one that's got to, I suppose, pull the finger out and be the one that brings it all together. So the kind of thing is, it's that there's not only one person that's to blame, it's a collaboration of all of them not coming together, because everyone's petrified of even looking at some of this stuff now because they don't really understand it. And I think that's why it's kind of, I've got to the point where I don't think you'll ever get back to maybe an architect, and hopefully you can quote me in years to come with this that I'm wrong, will ever be able to pull all this together, because they don't have the knowledge of the building risk, the space risk. The fire engineer may know the height and the shape and the form of the building. That's in Gateway 1, but they can't tell you the applicability of a product to meet the shape and form. And that's the bit that I'm kind of trying to portray and say, look, actually, that is all really the problem is. It's that one little bit. So if we've got like, and I think this is why I think what you're trying to do with the law of entry is brilliant. If we've got one text sub data sheet that says this is a damper or this is a door, these are all the things that need to be checked. Hence that list I had in the Excel. Please tick off what you want for that location. It's got to drive change just by doing that, and it enables the manufacturers to go, before you buy my damper or door, please tell me what you want, because without any of these, I can't make it. And I think it's got to come, because even in my, I hate to say it, even in my business, and I don't mean to have a go at it, but it's a knowledge loss thing, and it's a maturity thing now that's going to take a while to get it back. Is that we sign contracts where if something's discrepant, the employer gets to choose. But it doesn't mean, like as an example, I've got one good one at the moment where I've got a power critical system in a building, which is a resin bar, and resin bars are used because they're inherently, fire rated. They don't burn, they don't melt. It's just a lump of resin on a bar that doesn't do anything. But they're not EN tested, they're still 476 because it's electrical test. But when you look at the heights of these buildings, have expansion bellows for the bars, the riser's too small. Now, I've said to the guys on site is that, have you classified out all the things that go with it all to understand what it was? And they're going, no, we're just going to change it to a HV system. And I'm going, no, you're missing the point, is that the employer can instruct the riser big or instruct you to do something completely different. It's all the things that come into it, and it all comes back down to is that we still think that this issue lies with manufacturers, supply chain. It doesn't. It lies with us to bring the picture together. In a CM job where the client's responsible for design, they've got to do it. But if they can't do it, then we can help them do it, which is generally what we get roped into in construction management contracts. But you still need kind of like a code. This is what I've kind of said with the PFKG, is that you still need a code of practice. Then you need the tail off workbooks. Like, not to quote you guys too much here, but the guide that was done on part 3, you could call it a purple book, is fantastic for part 3. But you need a part 2, a part 1, you need a part 5, you need a part 13 for flip. You need workbooks for all of them in very simplistic fashion to go, if you're doing a wall and it's a wall on level 5 in a big commercial office, but it's got a flue, a door, a glazed panel, a damper, a smoke extract, a kitchen extract, pipe work, this is how you do the system approach on it. You know what I mean? The last thing you select is the wall, because the wall needs to be selected to meet the minimum, so the maximum thickness or the minimum, where you want to look at it, for all the components that sit in the wall. Do you know what I mean? That's the only way you can look at it. Then you've got to look at access and installation. Everything needs access both sides to form the seal. So shaft wall's a bit irrelevant if you've got seals that need access both sides. You've got to change the riser sizes. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Paul, I think I've shared with you, but I don't know if the rest of the team.
I was harping on then, George. I was in the zone, the mental cinema.
No.
It was all playing out.
I showed Paul a couple of weeks ago something that I've come across about a month ago, which is a standardized inspection tool for fire doors. Have I shown it to you at all?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I've been really thinking last week.
I don't see it, George.
Okay, I'll show it to you in a second, but I'll just put the context behind it. I attended a workshop that Sodexo had, because they've got thousands of fire doors, as you can imagine. Well, probably hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands anyway, of fire doors that they're managing, and they needed to make sure that their own internal people had a pragmatic way of inspecting them, and also deciding what needed to be done. So they pulled in an expert in this who you might know him, Ian. Alan Oliver, his name is. And he set up something years ago called Checkmate, and he then went to the BRE. And he
it does ring a bell.
He seems a very dedicated guy, and one of the things that he did, he worked with the NHS a few years ago, and that he produced a standard inspection document or set of guidance for doors in fire doors in healthcare. And what he's very keen to do is to do the same for residential. So what I've agreed to do with him is set up a little work stream within BIM for Housing to actually look at what he's done and see how we can modify it to reflect residential. So the reason I'm raising it is that this could be quite a useful tool, I think, not just for fire doors, but the methodology. So if I just show you what he's shared with me. So this is it. This is his company, another golden thread. But these are the people that he's had involved in developing the original one. And this is the way it's sort of structured. And he's got this where it's compliance inspections for new doors, existing doors, and then ongoing inspections, and then putting together a robust fire door management system. So I think that probably a lot of these activities, I think the copy is probably going to be fairly common for Resi, but it would be a matter of replacing the photographs with something that's a bit more suitable. So this is what I was thinking, but I don't know if that type of methodology might be something that we use, on the other asset types that we're looking at.
Yeah, and I think you did send this through actually from memory. I think you have. I've seen it definitely. And I think the interesting one with this was obviously it was the Part Q part that was kind of missing from it, the security piece, which not the end of the world. I think where I was trying to that thing I said where I was trying to get to earlier is that each if you take dampers is probably an easier one because I've done the work on it, right? Is that you've got 4 types of blade, as I've sort of described. With fire doors, how many types of swing have you got? How many types of leaf have you got? Does that make sense? There's going to be, this is the kind of microcosm of stuff that needs to be kind of listed out, because you've got to work I'm working on the basis that the specifier doesn't know how to specify, because that's what I'm seeing. And I'm kind of like asking a manufacturer to pin a tail on a donkey in the dark. I wonder why it's all going wrong. So I think what they've done, George, I haven't been through it all, to be quite frank with you. So I'm not being rude with it. I just didn't get the time, unfortunately. So I think if we can get like a general template that works kind of for everyone, where you know that if it is a fire door, then because I think you get Ian, do you get dual swing fire doors? You do, don't you?
Sorry, yes, you can do.
Yeah, so you could get single leaf one way, single leaf two ways, double leaf one way, double leaf 2 ways. You could get it all, couldn't you? So you kind of like, then you've got the security element on that door. Is it a Z bracket, an L bracket? Is it a mortise lock inside the door? You've got to have it in such a way that you kind of this my view is you've got to make it so hard for the builder to select the wrong thing. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's two aspects to this.
Yeah.
As Martin said earlier, what you showed us was something that was for principally for the designers.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas what I was trying to look at here was if we can break it down exactly, the installer or the person that's doing it, the post installation inspections as well, and also the ongoing inspections. So if we could perhaps look at this from a point of view of both the prescriptive specification, which I think is what you're looking at there, Paul, and then how do we then how do we then inspect what's already installed?
Because do you remember, Joe? What I mean, let me just try and line this up quickly to make it easier to see. Just give me, I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, this is about not just about this. This is about other things that's going on in my head with other people as well. So it's good. It's good to hear all of this. So just 1 second. Let me just find the right button. Quickly, let's leave that there a second. So when I was kind of showing you, forget that. When I was kind of showing these, right, on here, is that if you've selected, so if I've selected this, whatever one I've selected, what I've got corresponding, this is about building it up in the right way was these. So that is a flange damper. That tells you everything around the inspection of it and the installation of it you needed to know. That's, a back damper. That's the plastered in one. That's the reverse deflection head one. Cemented in. Curtain, like the fabric curtain types. Built into the wall cleats.
But what are you asking? I'm just asking here because I don't really understand. If somebody's being asked to do that inspection, it looks to me as though you're asking them. This would be for an installed damper, wouldn't it?
Well, not necessarily, because what the hard bit is that once look, in order to I suppose this is the off the record. This is off the record, but like with the national occupational standards with fire dampers, not speaking too much because I'm not allowed to. Is that one of the debates really is that when does installation not become cognitive of how it was designed for its appropriateness in the first place? Because when you think about it in this context, is that if you're doing an inspection on a fire damper, a drop test is the easiest part. Someone's still got to check that the seal and the rest of the things that go with it are still there in the same working order for the component that was chosen in the first place. It's not just the operation of that, and the same must be true of a.
Is it the case that is an inspection validating the design, or when you inspect something, do you need to be in a position to be able to make an assumption, rightly or wrongly, that the design was correct in the first place?
Well, the question really is, this is where the debate's kind of raging on. So I'm not saying what I'm saying is right, wrong, or indifferent, but if that is what was designed, chosen, and installed, if you're inspecting it, you've got to be able to inspect that it operates correctly, the power's on, it's still in the right type of wall construction it was designed for. It's still certified for VE, and it's still the type of damper that was installed. Because what happens in relation to time on jobs is things move, don't they? Someone may do some rework. So I don't think it's just a case of inspecting the physical. You've got to inspect all of this part as well. And that's the debate that's kind of going on. Because traditionally, if you, I'm just looking at this from other people's eyes, right, is that the problem with like fire dampers, as an example, is they're mistaken with smoke control all the time, right? And they're two inherently different products, right? But also is that, the ventilation contractors have seen dampers as one of their products, but actually it's not. It's a compartmentation device that sits on a wall that allows the air to go through it, transfer from one space to the other in a safe manner. Does that make sense? It's not really a ventilation device, is it? And it's the way we treat things in silos rather than in systems. You know, that's the bit I'm getting at, is that if you inspect it, I mean, not being funny, but if you're going to inspect it, the first thing is you need that space to get in and look at it anyway. You need the access doors. You need all of this stuff.
Isn't that this the point? That's the point I was sort of struggling with when I was trying to pull that papers together, and it is all over the place at the moment. But the data journey has to be a product data sheet into something which is a live embodiment of what's actually happening in the real world, into a digital twin, which is sort of that final version of that building. And all of this data isn't all going to get on a material data sheet, is it?
No.
The next bit is the material, whatever you call it, whether it's some kind of product passport, material passport, has to be that, as you know, how we installed it, who installed it, how it was installed. And then the inspector's job surely is to look at, has anything happened to it between then and now that renders it useless?
Well,
So the shouldn't be looking for what's there, because that should be a matter of record. They should be looking to ensure that what's there hasn't been compromised.
And I think this is where I came from this originally, where I need some help getting these into proper template. Is that if that's what the requirement was, which is that flowchart made simple, that's the stuff that affected the geometry. That's the asset information that you need to record, and the PDF held stuff is really just the certification, the DOP of the damper, and maybe the test results of it.
But that should be the information held should be the product data sheet.
Yeah.
And that product data template should include everything that's required for the declaration of performance, because so in a way, the product data sheet, the declaration of performance should be something that's produced for regulatory purposes from the product data sheet, surely. Because the product data sheet should be that single source of all the truth about this product.
Yeah,
this is a regulatory document that we have to produce. The data sheet is everything from it, and that's why we want to go back to all of our data templates now and ensure that it's aligned with the characteristics from the declaration of performances, plus the EPDs, plus everything else you might ever need to know about that product. And that core data sheet has to be everything. And then, in a way, the manufacturer is passing all that information across, and then that gets checked through some kind of pass-through system. Once you've actually determined from a main contractor point of view who's responsible for fabrication of that system, because then the person taking responsibility for fabrication of the system has to then start to check the interfaces and junctions, or it's done by the main contractor because it's handed out as a construction-only contract with no design and build aspect. I don't know if you've seen, there's a really horrible court case that dropped just before Christmas. Which it's not been published yet, but the lawyers have started to talk about it, and I've got a copy of it if anybody wants it. But it's a DMB, it's a cladding DMB contract, subcontracted through a cladding DMB contract, and the specialist has copped 100% of the responsibility. And there's definitely something odd that's gone on, because they've tried to caveat out the vertical fire breaks, saying that they thought it should have been built with vertical fire breaks, because they had design and build. That's been overruled, and they said, well, if they should have had it, you should have put it in. I think anyone who knows the construction process will see that for whatever reason they were under pressure to remove those breaks. They thought it was a bad idea, but thought they'd get away with it by caveating it.
No, it's interesting, because one of the worst things you could ever do in caveats is say we're not allowed for something, because it doesn't mean you haven't got to do it. I've been there with that one.
Yeah.
And that's probably what it sounds a bit like here. And this is why it's also interesting, all this, because it always comes back into my head. It's just really all this is just procurement.
But our job here, though, surely our job here, this working group, is about making sure, checkmate, I've got some history working with George. I'd put them in the same category of the people previously discussed in terms of how much of a team player they are. But the simple fact is, whatever systems are developing, we've just got to make sure that the baton of data is being passed effectively.
Yeah.
So that we know that they're plugging into a wider system. And what's really important is that central core of data has got to be defined better. Well, it doesn't matter how many data dictionaries or whatever we use. We just it's a beggar's muddle, it's called. We've just got to get that structured data journey right through the middle of the industry, so that everybody's got access to it.
And that is where I've got to, Ian, is that it's just literally my last bit of my own mental head is that just to get the template done with all the information on it and get that out to a few manufacturers and go, this is what we think you should be asking people to verify that when they're buying your product, would probably resolve 90% of the issue, because then it's out there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's just everything else is then you've just got to ask that person for that piece of information, that person for that piece of information.
Yeah.
It's not, there's additional packets of information that sit beyond the product data sheet.
I just don't think the knowledge is there to do it, Ian. That's that. I don't see. My issue is, and you know, I've been around the block in a few different big builders, and what I've seen is, even with this one here, is that, you know, we're more of a management company than we are really design and build. You know, and I don't mean that to be derogatory to the business, because I love the business. The problem is that we still go, let's get the information from the consultant, let's check the spec, here you go and procure that for the MEP, and you go, well, what dampers are they buying? They go, well, it just says a fire damper. Well, what is it? Well, I don't know, they're going to do it on CPD or CDP, and you go, well, that's no good, is it? Because the wall types are being procured through, say, a BDO or someone like that now, and I go, well, I don't know that's compatible with that. When's the doors coming? They get done by the joinery contractor 9 months after. I go, well, that's security. God knows, that's way in the distance. It's a recipe for a disaster. So having that, as you're saying, like, because the wall's the common denominator. Agree with that, Ian? The wall, common denominator. Everything's got to feed into that system approach of the wall. So one for dampers, one for doors, one for flues. One pipework's the hardest one because it's material based. It's not just classification. There's more nuances to go through, but you can get enough there so you can go, well, before I select the one, I need all this information for this wall data sheet. If we've got a damper, it should be something that's gone through that process. I've got a door, it's got to gone through that process. This is all the asset information that's required for me to set the wall.
That's the key word there, Paul, is asset information, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think the industry unfortunately has not got the skill to bring it together. It's too siloed, massively too siloed,
and too bespoke as well, Paul.
Yeah, no, it is. No, I'm with you, and I think, you know, my energy is going into trying to do practical workbooks for each individual subject, because it's the only way I could kind of fathom that I could get an architect, a building services and consultant, a fire engineer going, oh, geez, okay, now I understand. And the worst one for me is the structural engineers, because, God, you fire the starting gun, they're off, aren't they? They're gone into the distance. Underlay, Ariba, they're gone, aren't they? And it's like, well, I ain't changing my structure, mate. And you go, well, like Ian said, but your tolerances don't work. Your slabs like jelly. The drift is enormous. I can't make this work for anything that goes in the walls anyway.
Salt of the earth, structural engineers.
Do you know what I mean? So I'm having a go, but you know what I mean? It's just that they'll set a structure out with all of these products where we're talking like, you know, like we're cracking a safe in relation to blooming tolerances here, and they're like, well, I've got plus or minus 25 mil at line and linear, and I've got plus or minus 10 on deviation from a horizontal slab, plus 5 for you know, the nuances on the crustation of it, and you go, well, that's no bloody good to me, is it? About the products, you don't know whether I mean, I've got big examples where drywall's been selected and it should have been brick and block because the products are too big for drywall to house.
Yeah.
So the structure is inherently wrong from day one. It's too lean.
Think we might be going down a bit of a rabbit hole with. I want to, in my mind, separate design, what people should be doing in terms of design, from what they're capable of. I take on board your comment there, Paul, that you know you're having to do all this because you don't think there's a lot of people out there who are capable of doing it themselves. That's probably true. But from the product data sheets, because the product data or the data sheets won't be able to contain. They're not design solutions, are they? They're just bits of information, really. It's for designers to say what I need here gets satisfied by that product according to the data sheet, rather than that data sheet will give me a solution.
Yeah, the data sheet's a component in this whole process, isn't it?
Yeah, and the manufacturers are going to be reluctant to share too much data about their products, which is why we are where we are at the moment, I think, as an industry. Because if you bear all and put all of your information on a data sheet, then our our friends over in China are going to copy it, aren't they? Sell it to you for half the price.
With a nice looking CE mark, which isn't a CE mark, yeah?
Yeah, I've seen those CE marks, yeah.
Chinese export.
Yeah.
Mate, the amount of times I've put that in front of people and they go, I never knew. And you go, well, there you go. Now you do. It's funny.
So I think we're right to focus in on fire-related type data sheets. But I'm not, I'm not sure what the parameters are, how far we're going to get with this, because we won't get all of the information. We'll get some of it, and it's bloody hard, sort of, because like Paul says, every time you go into the detail, it just grows, doesn't it? Arms and legs, and you need all this and all that.
Is that where the data sheet? So the data sheet becomes. So this is a bit I'm not clear on, but sort of simplistically in my brain, that's when a data sheet becomes a passport, Martin, because you're then looking at how that data was validated in the process. So you can validate so if all of the data is not available to everybody beyond a certain point because of intellectual property, whatever it is, you need to record how that data was validated, which is where you're starting to move into the world of a material passport or a product passport or system passport, whatever it is.
But it'll never, I can't see how it would ever replace a designer saying, I need this performance, that iterative approach, if you like, rather than he goes and selects. Because when you and I go and buy a TV, we have our preferences and our foibles and our sort of specification that we've got largely in mind in terms of size and what have you, but we don't go and can't select one based on all of the information that's available.
If you asked an architect, you'd get Monka vision, wouldn't you?
Can I?
Does Paul's spreadsheet not start to set that down to this is the process that went through to validate the in situ?
I think it does. I think that this. Do I think the problem is right with this, right? And this, I mean, look, it's horrific. Forget all of this for it, which is about relationships, right? But it's horrific when you look at it. You go, is it really that complicated? And the answer is, unfortunately, it is.
It is, yeah.
I can't. But then you've got to look at the compatibility of a VE, flexible wall with a product. You've got to go through that hoop as well. And this is about installation, 3-sided, 4-sided, the rating of the wall, the interface. You've got to be able to know that if you've got that right, you've still got to make sure that is part of the system's compatible, which is really what I was trying to say with that diagram there.
Yeah.
Is that
that's just one. Surely that's when you're going to start to move, I would assume, in terms of main contractors saying, look, we're not prepared to deal with that level of choice. So we've got to start constraining it down to these are the 5, 10, whatever it is, common types that we're going to use, because the inefficiency of the process is undermining the whole of the construction industry.
Yeah,
so you can.
Part of the problem is, Ian, is that the inefficiency of the process starts before Gateway 1. So that's where this whole sort of passive fire knowledge piece comes into fruition. But
that's where the I with A stuff comes in, isn't it? There's only so much we can do. It then becomes a lobbying piece by the passive fire knowledge group to say, this is the beggars model you're creating by these choices.
Yeah.
Therefore, and I guess that's when you start to move into you start to drive modern methods of construction, not necessarily just meaning off-site structure, but more of the design work being done before the construction process begins, and that way you're back to get. So all of this, it's almost like the complexity is the reason to change, isn't it? Because we can't go through this project. We're going to have to do it for a while, but at some point there's got to be a jumping off point to say, well, actually we're going to work into these effectively like robust details.
Yeah.
You seeing them further on down the line, are you, Ian? Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Yeah. I don't know, and I think it's you sort of. But you just think common sense would tell you that it's all too fragmented. So there needs to be some kind of mechanism for rationalising all of that lot, so that you don't have to go through that process every time.
But
and then probably, I would imagine, with that sort of 80-20 rule, to say that 80% of our buildings are built using these standard details, And then standard details, effectively your own system builds that each main contractor will probably have slightly different versions of. And then within that, there'll be 20% of the industry which is still building off skyhooks, but doing it by testing and, you know, and having to sort of push the envelope in order to deliver that vision from whatever architect, which will be a more expensive building process because it will be outside of your
standard
details.
Yeah, which comes back to, you know, it is bloody complicated. It is bloody amazingly complex, and you do have to do it every time because of the bespoke nature of what we build. Everybody wants their own thing, don't they? And you have to start again from scratch each and every time.
But the public sector are already changing, aren't they, Ross? You know, the new hospitals trust, they're looking at more standardisation, and it might not be this wave of hospitals we land in, but we learn from this lot and we do it better next time round, and and it's that iterative improvement that's good. And I think that's where for me that's where the Classifier Knowledge Group Paul gives me some hope. It's not going to be able to solve everything in that group, but it will be able to add a little bit of context and help to create a stronger lobby to change the problems at source.
Well, so go on, Josh.
Yeah, I was just going to say the standardization piece, Ian, is I think at two levels. One is if we can, and one's easier, and that's data standardization. So if we can have data standardization for these elements, then that's even if the products aren't standardized, the data standardization should be achievable. But what I'd like to do is just differentiate between the thing that I've spent the last 7 or 8 years on, which is trying to get standardized data templates. Against just getting a data sheet. And the reason I'm suggesting that we just initially go down the track of just getting what manufacturers already publish and are willing to provide, it gets us, it starts us off down a track where there's at least something to work to. But can I just show you for a minute what we use in what's underpinning lexicon, and just briefly the challenge that we've got there. Is that okay?
Yeah, cool. George, just on lexicon, I think the problems with lexicon now are political, not practical, aren't they?
I definitely agree.
It becomes a relevant authority. So we know pretty much from what's described in lexicon already what a relevant authority looks like. Now that means FIS would likely to apply to become a relevant authority in certain areas because it would make sense. So realistically, I think working with BIM for Housing and FIS together, then we should be able to effectively assume relevant authority status until somebody tells me what other hoops and jumps I need to jump through. But we can get ahead and actually do some of the bloody templating work now, rather than worrying about whether I needed to include the Widget and Sprocket Manufacturers Association in the conversation or not. It's and that's not me trying to land grab, because whoever we need to assign and work with, happy to do it. I don't care which trade association, which industry group it is. Nobody's off bounds for us to work with, right? So, and we would happily put anything past any other group out there. But I think getting those templates laid down has got to be the next critical step.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way the templater was designed, which is the underpinning technology behind lexicon, it was done using a data dictionary, an open data dictionary standard. So therefore, anybody that is producing information in a data dictionary that could have these things connected can do so. So there's nothing restrictive on that. If I could just show you a couple of steps in this process. So this is for a door. Yeah, so this is any type of door. It's not a fire door, it's not a balcony door, whatever. It's any type of door. And these parameters here are only the BIM parameters, they're IFC. Now there's other parameters like the parameters for environmental performance and things like that, which may not be IFC related, but these are the ones that are IFC related. So if we look here at the common attributes that some experts have decided are critical to describe a door. You've got here fire rating, acoustic rating, etc. Now, there's a corresponding set of information requirements that are fire integrity or fire insulation rating. So that's a slightly different way of approaching that. And therefore, there's going to be lots of different perspectives. So this property set here, I think, is principally put together for designers. But well, it's unclear. So then what you've then got, that can then be generated as a data template for people to fill in. What we do with that within ActivePlan, we pull that into an asset information requirement data set. So we've got those same templates here, but we're applying them this time to a fire door. So you can differentiate between a fire door and just a standard internal door. And what that can then do is produce for us a data template, but you can also see here all of the parameters that are defined in IFC. And you can also add custom parameters as well. So the purpose of this is to then create something that then becomes a machine readable set of information, and you can then produce this as a Word document or as a spreadsheet to be filled in. So this is the COBE data, but these are then the additional attributes that have been defined through the template. So the reason I'm explaining this is that the attributes for a door are going to be different than the attributes for a fire damper. They're going to be different than the attributes for an AOV, and that's the challenge. We've already got we've got a lot of those already built in a national in a master library that we can share. This is what we developed with the but I'm just saying it's a way forward. But the key thing here, determining, that's the challenge that Lexicon and everybody's got. Which attributes do you actually want to use? Because different people will want them for different purposes. Designers will want certain information, procurement people will want certain information, and installers are going to want, and inspectors. And you can't get all of that from a manufacturer because the manufacturer wouldn't know. Have I just confused things?
He'll know his product though, George, won't he?
Yeah, but he won't know some of the, he'll know his product, but that's where what Paul's doing is so important. And that is knowing what it is in that particular context.
Yeah, he won't know where it's going to be installed, you know, what the design parameters are in order that it satisfies.
Yes.
That's for the designer.
And they need a bit of help.
Yeah. It is a tricky one.
I mean, is there a reason here to maybe have a sort of small workshop with a kind of an invented design team on an invented, very simplistic scheme and work through the process to try and understand, what might be required?
And I think it's probably going to be easier, Mark, because you try to do this stuff internally, mate. Do you know what I mean? You get shut down. Get shut down, mate. They just can't, even my lot internally can't process it. And they're just like, I don't know why you want to do this. It's for the designer. And you go, but they can't do it.
Should we therefore have two? Should we have one that is design focused and one that is inspection and asset management focused?
Yes. I think you do need to separate the two, because we were getting confused when we were running the two scenarios, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Definitely
that
design.
something, Mark?
So yeah, you could look at it from the gateway point of view, couldn't you? Really?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Which is we can. It's just like we can use the thing I've done for the PFKG around. So the more of us that do this, the better, around how you look at what gateway one is. Do you know what I mean? You can look at it. That's what I tried to do that example around. So it's a better way of trying to embed it in people's heads, the importance of it.
What effectively you want is somebody to sort of act as a clerk of information through this process, don't you? Sort of independent clerk of information.
That's an interesting point.
So that's mapping that data and ensuring that there's sort of an independence and there's a consistency of where the data's coming from and where the data's going. So you almost want somebody. We could reach out if we did this through the Passive Fire Knowledge Group. Would be a good place to do this, Paul. I think, because you'd be looking at it, and then you could throw back the challenges you've done for housing and different other groups. I wonder if we could get a building inspector involved.
Yeah.
To do
I think
that.
it is. I think it is. I think the big thing. I think, you know, like, I mean, just to give you the history, and this isn't, you know, having a go at anything in the industry, is that the thought process initially was it was a builder's work issue, and I've kind of said it's not a builder's work issue. It's a descriptive to prescriptive problem. But it shows its face at that stage of the work when nothing bloody fits. You know, because of ill selection of products and wrong performance characteristics, whatever. You know, wrong seal types, and you know the whole thing. So I think, to get to that point where I can get it to work, the most important component for me, and I'm going to say it again, is still the BIM side. The BIM Revit files, templates, assets, what's going to solve 90% of the problem, because it's going to force people to get stuff given to them where they've got to select things appropriately. That's my panacea, if you understand what I mean. So yeah, I think the PFKG is where we're going to do it in. But I think I've sort of said to Joe as well, is that I will need to bring some of your expertise, George, on board with it as well. But
Sure.
having a, like, even for me internally, getting a project, and I think I may have one where I can kind of get the two to marry up, might be a good thing as well. So I want everyone to get the benefit of it, not just everyone. It's no good one person having, you know, one organisation getting it right. Everyone's got to be able to get it right. Supply chains have got to come on board. You know,
I was just thinking about a willing designer or two, an architect and an engineer, services engineer, take part.
Yeah. There's a few. I mean, who do you use for building services engineers generally, Martin?
There is no answer to that question, because there is no general.
Yeah.
But I you know, we could tap into the boys and girls at WSP, no doubt.
Yeah, no, we do special relationships with them as well, so that's a good one. You know, because we use them a lot for things. You know, as a starter, because, you know, we took not being facetious, we took on a big exercise on 2 big jobs, and they've come out of it a lot better than they were before, which is good for them. So I'm all for that.
But who's in the design working group? As there's people already on board as such.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, that's absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, you're right.
Because I suspect that group has possibly lost a little bit of focus. So maybe this could be something to join things up.
Well, certainly David Miller would I think contribute. I'm just trying to think who we've got from an M&E point of view. Max Fordham used to be very active, but I'm not sure that
Architect,
there's
isn't
somebody
he,
I could
George?
approach. Max Fordham, no, is no M&E.
Is he?
Yeah.
Goes to show, doesn't it? I've got him down as an architect.
Yeah.
It's probably something that Will could help us out with through the Passive Fire Knowledge Group again, Paul, isn't it?
George, what about Patrick?
Patrick's an architect.
Sorry, I thought you were looking for a designer architect.
No. I think probably David Miller are probably the best
Right,
one,
okay.
because they're in the zone, as it were.
Sure.
They're actually pretty active in this. I'm just thinking from an M&E point of view.
Well, Will Pitts, the chair of the Passive Fire Knowledge Group,
Yeah,
has got background in that one, hasn't he?
yeah. No, we will, Ian, but I'll run it back past Will as well, because I've already mentioned this group to Will anyway, because of the BIM side of it as well, which is, to me, is my Achilles heel, is this BIM side of it, getting it. It's my kind of like final piece in the puzzle.
Who's Will? Is that the Langer Rock guy?
Yeah, he's head of BISA Technical, and he's the head of he's the chairperson with Joe on the PFKG.
Yeah,
chairperson. Yeah, that's right.
Who does he work for?
Langer Rock. Yeah, Mica Services. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Real nice
Good.
guy.
Yep.
But he's not an M&E designer as such, is he, Paul?
Yeah, he don't forget Langer Rock does design and build, and he runs there. He's a technical leader for Mica Services. He's the engineering side of Langer Rock.
Yeah, like you said earlier, Paul, we all do design and build, but we don't do design.
No, I know
properly.
What you're saying. Yeah.
It's we want to surround ourselves with the designers, not the kind of the leads and the heads and the strategic people, the people that are nuts and bolts, hands on.
Yeah.
I think WSP would be a better shout, unless we've got somebody on one of the other groups who's working for Palcro or somebody else. I don't know.
Let's look at who we've got, and we'll make some suggestions. Agreed.
Okay.
And we do the same. We do the same on the inspection and maintenance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
I'll work on that, unless you've got anybody in particular.
No. But I do think it needs an engineer, M&E engineer, and an architect.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. 12:30.
I think that was good.
Yeah, we're an hour and a half ahead of where we were this morning, but yeah, it's a big thing to get your head around, isn't it, for everybody? Well, I guess for me.
But I'll carry on. I've got ISG interested in joining, by the way.
Okay.
And also Wilmot Dixon.
Okay.
Have you got Charlie Versi? Yeah.
No, is that from ISG?
Yeah. Who have you got?
It's Jack. I've forgotten his surname for the minute. Jack Dearlove.
Dearlove, yeah, Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know Ben Elliott, and I know Charlie Versi come over from Multiplex to ISG. Basically, the two. Ben's the lead for innovation for the business, and I suppose Charlie's like the other director that's doing the innovation and moving forward with it. So Charlie's a good asset to have on board, because he's around the quality piece. He's epic. He's brilliant. Does a bit of speaking around it as well. He's a good guy. So just bear his name in mind, George, as well. I'll send his details over.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, and what's the other guy, Ben?
Ben Elliott won't be really that interested. He'll go to Charlie. So Charlie's the right person.
Okay. Great. Is it Steve Cook at Wilmot Dixon, George?
It's Ches. Yeah, I can't remember his surname. Yeah, he works in the products group. He works for Steve Cook, or with Steve Cook. So that I've involved him in the sort of discussions. So that could be quite a good group. Yeah.
Let's go for it.
I'll follow through on that one.
Okay. Well, enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week, chaps.
Thank you.
Do it all again soon.
Cheers.
You too, guys. Thanks, Ian. And Ian, I'll give you a shout later on, mate. Okay.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, buddy. See you, mate. Take care, guys.